Yeah, please have a
Hi.
seat. So, if you're just joining us, in this hour we're visiting with the folks from the Lincoln School, well, actually the Rhode Island Festival of Children's Books and Authors. It's held annually at the Lincoln School. It's been going on and off now for 25 to 30 years. It is one of the most important children's book festivals in the nation. What's unique about this is not only does it support international talent, but it also brings a lot of international talent who happens to be local here. Welcome to the coalition.
Thank you.
All right.
It's nice to be here.
Nice to be here.
Thanks
Now,
for having me.
Just since I'm sharing a couple of personal anecdotes,
Please do.
you were involved with a book because you've had literally two different careers. You've been both an editor at a very high level.
This is true.
All right.
Yeah.
And also a children's author. You probably didn't know this, but LaReau actually, for a short period of time, actually lived in Cumberland, Rhode Island. There was actually a small mouse with big dreams.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm sure there's more than one.
Right, but
Yeah.
but she was in Cumberland,
Yeah.
Rhode Island, and
Interesting.
we still celebrate that book, and we have the collectible lunchbox, and the we went to the movie the first night it was out in the middle of a blizzard because LaReau was a small mouse with big dreams.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have a fascinating background. You have a master's in fine arts from Emerson.
I do.
Okay, and so.
You've clearly done your homework.
Well, it's a lot of fun. The great part about having your own show is you get to interview and meet all the kind of really cool people that normally you just wouldn't get to talk to.
That's right.
So this is just a lot of fun for me. So you actually started out on the editing side.
I did, yes.
So you were with Scholastic, a few other imprints.
I was
as well.
with Candlewick Press for just under a decade, and then I was at Scholastic Press for about 3 or 4 years. Yes.
Right. So you worked on, you talk about seminal children's books. You, according to what I researched, you worked on Winn-Dixie.
I did, yes.
That's
I guess I'm the one who discovered Kate, if you
Kate
can
Camillo.
say that.
Yep.
Kate DiCamillo, yes. Yep. I was, I believe, an editorial assistant at the time. I think I was 26.
Wow.
Yes. But I was a very hungry 26-year-old editor. And when I was brought into Candlewick, one of my first jobs there was to clean out the office of an editor who had gone on maternity leave and had decided not to come back. And so there were a lot of manuscripts in her office that were waiting for someone to give them attention.
Right.
They were submissions, I should say. And so I would bring home these boxes of manuscripts and read through them and decide how to respond to them and make notes on them as to how they should be attended to. And one of them was because of Winn-Dixie. And I had read enough manuscripts at that point to know that this one was really special, although it wasn't, it was similar to the book that you read today, but it was a couple of drafts away from the book that you could read today. But I could tell right off the bat that this person really knew how to tell a story. This person was a craftsperson. And so at the time, of course, I had no ability to sign up a book on my own, but I wrote a very impassioned editorial letter to my boss and just said, we have to sign this book up. And I went into her office and I handed it to her and I said, you have to take a look at this. And I really credit her that, first of all, that she saw the same thing that I did in it, which wasn't very hard to see, but that she then allowed me to edit the book.
Wow. That's an awesome responsibility.
Yes, yes. Although at the time the book came out, fiction really wasn't on the rise. Really, picture books were kind of the hot commodity.
Right.
This is back in the sort of mid to late 90s. It was sort of right before, or just before, sort of the Harry Potter craze that really kind of brought middle grade novels and novels in general back into vogue. So it wasn't so strange to have someone inexperienced working on fiction because that wasn't seen to be sort of the hot thing to work on.
Right.
So it was a way for me to kind of learn the ways of publishing. But yes, it was an incredible. Looking back on it now, it's like, how did they let me work on that book? But it was also, I was really hungry and just put everything I had into that book, just everything I had.
Talk to me about Despero, because you get personal. I mean, just how did that book evolve?
Well, that's a funny story, and Kate has told this story too. That she sent me the first 30 pages of that book, and she was very, didn't seem very confident about it, and just said like, I don't really know what this is, and it was it's very different from Because of Winn-Dixie, which is takes place in the South, and it's fairly realistic, and this book is like it's a fairy tale. It's a
dark but very challenging but fascinating fairy tale.
That's right.
And it celebrates in its own way a celebration of people's individuality.
That's right. But it was very different from what she had written before, which were these very Southern novels about real kids with real problems, and I think that there are some publishers who would prefer that an author would kind of, if they're done really well writing a certain thing, they want more of that same thing. Right. And so I think that's where some of her insecurity came from. Like, I don't know if this is too different for you. Right. And for me, whether I'm an editor or an author, it all comes down to, is it a good story? And it clearly was. And so my response to her was maybe 2 words, and it was just keep writing. And that's how it started. She just kept writing that story and delivered it to me, and off we went again with going back and forth and editing that book.
Right, and to me, it's what's fascinating as someone who's not a writer, but I think I can appreciate great writing, is that both books were amazingly written, amazing reads, and both translated into really interesting movies too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, they're very cinematic. They're both very cinematic. She's a very cinematic writer, so they lend themselves to the big screen.
Okay. So what was that creative spark? What was that moment when you said, okay, I've spent a number of years working with writers. What was the moment when you decided you had to make the leap yourself?
Well, it's funny because I had always been a writer. When I went to grad school, I went to school for writing, and so I'd always considered myself a writer. When I needed to make some money, which is why I decided to go into publishing. And then, you fall in love with working with other people and helping them to make their stories better. And you just throw all your creative energy into that. And that's what I did for a really long time. While I was editing, I did get inspired. You just get inspired by working around so many creative people. And that led me to say, I get some ideas. The ideas just came to me, and I said, maybe I'll try during my downtime to write a couple things. And I didn't have a lot of downtime, so the first things I wrote were picture books. Those are the first things I had published.
Right.
I didn't have the time to sit down and really think about the full story of the investment that a novel or even a chapter book requires. And then I left and I went to Scholastic for a while, and then I ended up getting laid off at the beginning of sort of the Great Recession. I think they called it Black Wednesday or Black Tuesday, when a lot of people in publishing they downsized everyone. I opened my own freelance consulting business for a while. I did that. I still worked with authors on their books, but I just felt like I wasn't giving my own stories a chance.
Right.
And I just thought, gosh, if I just had some time to myself to make that happen, I could write something longer. I could really invest in my own career. But it's like I wasn't willing to give myself that time. I always felt like these other authors I was working with were so talented and so successful. Of course, they were more important than me, than little old me and my writing.
Well, it's interesting because I once heard an interview with Jeff Daniels, who ironically I believe was in
the Winn-Dixie movie,
right.
Yes.
And Jeff Daniels talked about how, like every other starving young actor, you're faced with that moment in time where you have to make a decision to either just jump into your craft wholeheartedly without reservation, no safety net, or you always sort of try and keep that safety net around you. And I guess that's one of the most challenging moments in the life of an artist or a writer or someone theatrical.
That's right.
And what he pointed out was that in his experience, unless you were willing to make that dive, and it's a subject I've always been fascinated by, unless you're willing to really jump in, no life vest, no safety net, no.
That's right.
You inevitably, so few people can succeed if they hold that back.
That's right. Well, it's funny that you say that because for me, I didn't do that on my own. It happened for me because right around the time, so probably 1 year into having my own business, I got diagnosed with cancer. And I like went through treatments, and I'm fine now. But that was a real reality check for me.
Right.
That first of all, I finally got the time that I needed, the time off from my work. That I was saying, if I only had that time off, and finally I had months that I was going through these treatments, and I was healing, that I wasn't doing, I wasn't working. And it really put everything into perspective for me and made me rethink my life and what was really important. And that's when I was like, I can't put this off anymore. I've really got to give it my full attention.
Give it a shot.
Yeah, and so I retired from editing. I just said, I'm not going to do it anymore.
Cold turkey.
Cold turkey, relatively cold turkey. And I just started doing it.
Now, I've got to ask you, one of the things that's always fascinated me about children's books, for years, for generations, there was this preconceived notion of me growing up, I'm a child of the 60s, was that children's books had to have a point, had to have a morality play in it, there was an objective, there was some type of reason the book had to exist. Is that, I see that as far less the case now, that you're writing books that are standalone works of writing that stand by themselves. I'm repeating myself here, but in a sense, a standalone on their own merits.
Yeah.
And if there is a morality in that, or a happy ending or something, well, that's part of the process, but it's not the objective.
That's right. Well, for me, and I think for a lot of people in publishing, the first priority is it a good story? Right. It has to be a good story. It has to work as a good story. If you learn something, if there's an underpinning of meaning, of learning to it, then that's wonderful. But the first and foremost, it has to just be a good, entertaining story.
Right. There's a moment in the movie Big, which I always think of as one of the least talked about moments, where Tom Hanks is still very much the child, and they give him this toy to play with.
That's right.
All right, and I forget what it was, but it was.
I remember that. Yeah.
He goes, I don't get it.
Yeah.
And they mean, what do you mean? Because the toy had marketed so well.
That's right.
I mean, I've got to believe at some point 2 years ago there was more than one imprint talking about, all right, how do we get two sisters who are different, who we can get a song that'll get on the radio, and how can we make that into a movie and a book, and and how many times is the potential marketing opportunities or the merch driving the design of the book?
Sure.
And then you've got that whole school of celebrities books
by
people who decide one day, because they're celebrities, that they're somehow.
That's a whole other conversation for another time.
Right.
But the story of the two sisters, which is obviously Frozen, I'm gathering from you. It's a great story.
Right.
That's why it works. Is they are great at storytelling. That story is really engaging. I mean, my son is 4 and he's enjoyed it. He knows it backwards and forwards. He's known it since he was 2. But I enjoy watching it too because I think it's a really good story. And there are themes underneath about family and about sisters and about being yourself, and there's all that. But on the surface, it's a really good story.
Right.
So.
And that's, I mean, I would imagine, and having seen my own daughters grow up, that in so many different ways, children are the most brutally honest people that you're ever going to meet.
For sure.
And so if the story is there, they're sitting quietly obsessed by it.
Yeah.
And if they're very young, they're asking you to reread it again and again and again.
That's exactly right.
And if it's not, it's just
they will
not.
tell you.
It's just,
and they will be very honest. That's all they know how to be. So.
Right. In reading your bio, you talk about your stories being sort of evolutions of your day-to-day experiences and things like that. Now, you've got a couple of books here. First of all, we got to talk about, was it Louie and Ralphie?
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
The rats.
There's a story behind that.
All right. So, okay.
Sure.
And I know that's your current.
Yes, I'll show you this. So these are the two. This is the infamous rat Zoes.
Yeah.
Where am I showing these? Hello.
Right over here.
Okay, here. So this is the first in the series. This is a series of 4. It's called The Infamous Zoes. It's a chapter book for ages 5 to 8. And it's about these 2 guys, Louie and Ralphie. They're brothers. They are rats. They live in the big city. They live with their dad, Big Lou. Yeah. And it's about their adventures. And all of these stories are really about kind of, they're really good stories, first and foremost. But each one of them is about sort of an issue of what it means to be a guy, what it means to be a boy or a man. In this book, they think that they need to be tough all the time. They think that that's, sort of they have to do that. But they realize that they're not tough guys. And in their hearts, they're really kind and helpful and generous. And they realize that it's much easier to be those things than to be tough. Right. And then this one just came out just a few weeks ago on September 12th. This is called The Infamous Zoes Are Not Afraid. And in this one, every character in this book, it's revealed they're afraid of something, including Louie and Ralphie, although they are reluctant to admit it. And so this book is about the fact that we are all, part of being human is being afraid, and that's okay. But it's all about how they come to terms with their fears and how they learn to deal with them and not let their fears get the best of them. But when I first started to write these books, as I said, I was writing picture books at first, which are for much younger readers. And my agent had said to me, oh, you should really try writing something for older readers. And I was just reluctant because I had never tried it before. And I just thought, well, I need to come up with a really good idea. If I'm going to do this, it's got to be a story I'm really into. And so maybe I'll just wait until the story comes to me. And right around the same time, my grandfather passed away. And I was very, very close with him. It's very sad. And he had grown up during the Great Depression. He had a brother. His name was Ralph. His brother was named Lou. And, the Great Depression was hard on everyone. They had a single parent, their mom. Their dad had passed away when they were young. And so they were on their own a lot. And they had earned a reputation in their neighborhood for being troublemakers. So this is a story I heard all the time when I was growing up. And I always, when I heard that story, I would say, well, what kind of trouble did they get into? I wanted to know. No one would tell me. I don't know if it was like, did they get into so much trouble? I doubt it, because I know my grandfather, he was very good at heart. But I was left to imagine what kind of trouble they got into. And so I was thinking about that when he passed away, thinking about good memories of him. I was thinking about that. And so I really started to kind of imagine, like, I wonder what kind of shenanigans those two got up to. And that just kind of coincided with me needing to come up with an idea for this chapter book. And that's how The Infamous Zoes was born. And their names are Louie and Ralphie. And, a lot of the things that,
Which does your son identify with? Is he Louie or Ralphie?
I don't know yet. That's really funny. I'm going to say hi to him because he's watching right now. He's past his bedtime. He's 4. But I don't know if we know yet. He's a very kind person. So maybe there's a little bit of both. There is a lot of my grandfather in him, though. I'll say that. Yeah.
Now, you've got a couple of other books. You've got the Bland Sisters.
I brought those too. So this is another one. This is for slightly older readers. This is for, I'd say, 7 to 12. This series is a series of 3 books. The Zoes will be 4 books. The series is called The Unintentional Adventures of the Bland Sisters. The first book came out last January. This book is called The Jolly Regina. And this series is about these 2 girls. Their names are Jaundice and Kale Bland. They are they are the most boring girls. They're the most boring kids in the world. And each story is about what happens when they are plunged into an adventure and how these really, really boring kids deal with experiencing a real adventure. And in this one, they're kidnapped by lady pirates, and so they have this adventure on the high seas, and it's all about how they deal with that despite being so bland.
Now, remember, you're talking to someone who grew up on the Bobbsey twins and,
Yeah.
and the Hardy Boys.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it's kind of a yeah.
All right. Now,
they end up at the end of this book. It's funny you should say that. At the end of this book, they do end up reading, taking a book out of the library about the Nubbins twins, and that's sort of based on the Bobbsey twins. It's like a little joke. Yes.
Okay. And of course you've got, what is it? No slurping, no burping.
No slurping, no burping. I didn't bring my picture books, but that is a really good picture book. I think so, and it's about table manners. No slurping, no burping, a tale of table manners.
My wife will be having one autographed for you
yeah,
someday.
and that one was really fun to write. It was, I was asked to write a story about table manners by Disney. They were the publisher, and the illustrator, Laura Beauvais, is an incredible Disney animator.
Right.
And so they asked me to do a story about table manners, but I never like to do a book the way anyone else would write it. I'd like to put a very original spin on it. And I didn't want to do a book that was preachy and teachy about table manners, because that's super boring for kids and for me. And so in my book, the dad has really bad table manners.
I can't imagine that.
I'm sure you can't. I'm sure you can't relate. And the kids have excellent table manners, and they have to teach.
So
the
you
dad.
wrote this at my house.
Well, I wrote it at my house, at my family. It kind of came from, I'm not going to name any names, but there are some family members in my life that could use this book. That could use a lesson, a little brush up. Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Now, can I put you on a spot for a little bit? Can you do a quick read of one of them?
Oh, I absolutely could. What would you like to hear?
Well, I actually probably no slurping, no burping would have been
I don't
instrumental.
have that. I don't.
But,
yeah.
no,
I'll have to send you that. You can brush up. Yeah.
But something from the Bland Sisters.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. So this is from the Unintentional Adventures of the Bland Sisters, the Jolly Regina. I should mention that the Bland Sisters are so bland that the only book they read is the dictionary. And so every chapter starts with a definition from this dictionary.
Right.
So chapter 1, the definition is tepid, adjective, especially of a liquid, only slightly warm. If you ever find yourself on the road to Dullsville, you might encounter an unassuming house. In it reside the Bland sisters, Jaundice and Kale. You might tell the Bland sisters apart in several ways. First, Jaundice prefers to dress in gray, while Kale favors brown. Second, Kale wears her hair parted on the side, while Jaundice parts hers in the middle. Third, Jaundice is left-handed, while Kale is right-handed. Fourth, Kale is seldom seen without her backpack, in which she currently carries Dr. Nathaniel Snoot's Illustrated Children's Dictionary, a rather large leather-bound tome with a cracked spine reinforced with many layers of tape, a gold-stamped cover featuring the beatific silhouette of Dr. Snoot himself, and tabs along the side for each letter of the alphabet. The dictionary is the Bland sisters' favorite reading material and their main source of education. Carrying Dr. Snoot in her backpack is Kale's main source of physical and mental exercise. Fifth, Jaundice is known to wear a smock featuring an inordinate number of pockets. Being the more skilled seamstress of the two sisters, a skill learned from one of Dr. Snoot's educational sidebars called Know Your Stitches, Jaundice sewed this garment herself out of an old curtain and the upholstery of a long-since discarded couch. Usually the pockets contain such treasures as a sock-darning needle and thread, several milk bottle caps, a long shoelace with various knots tied in it, and half of yesterday's sandwich wrapped in a napkin. Jaundice tends to forget to empty her pockets before her smock goes into the wash, much to the chagrin of Kale, who does the laundry. Other than these few distinctions, the Bland sisters are just about the same. Is that good? I could go on, but I'll stop there.
Outstanding. Now, so you'll be at the festival again?
I will be there, yes.
All right, folks, again, if you're just joining us, this will be available on our YouTube channel. A delightful hour spent with some delightful people. This is, of course, I call it the Rhode Island Children's Book Festival, but there's a formal title to it.
Rhode Island Festival of
Children's Books and Authors, yes. All the information can be found at lincolnschool.org. Your website is LaReau.com, now spelled
That's right.
RALAREAU.
Yes,
.com.
and I appreciate you pronouncing my name correctly.
No, I watched the video.
That's good. That's good. Yes, that's why I have it on my website. You
So-
too can learn how to pronounce my name. Yes.
There you go. You'll be there. You'll be. You're doing one of the presentations?
I am, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk all about my childhood, and I will have all kinds of embarrassing childhood photos, and I'll talk about how I came to be a writer and how I came to write these books.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And your books will be for sale. Wonderful Christmas
Yes.
and Hanukkah presents.
Everything presents, yes.
Grandparents. That's my special appeal tonight, is grandparents.
Oh, yeah.
There are grandparents out there everywhere looking for ways to dote on their children. And I can
Sure.
think of no better way, no more life-affirming way than to buy a couple of your
That's
books.
right, and I'll have tons of swag too. I'll have bookmarks and cookies and all kinds of fun stuff to go with my books too.
Thank you so very much
Thank you.
for being here. Folks, again, the Rhode Island Children's Book Festival at the Lincoln School, 301 Butler Avenue, or as we say in Providence, or La Prove, at the end of the boulevard. There'll be a special event Friday evening. Again, a movie premiere, food, fun, Saturday, and this is key. Plan to spend the day there. There's going to be writing workshops, some really above average crafts, book related are going to be there. Authors, it's just, what a great way to not only have a wonderful day with your child, but also by setting an example, a very powerful example that to your children, how important reading is in their young lives. You set examples by engaging in it yourself. These are signals that they pick up on. If you're willing to invest an entire day, you've got the prospect of changing you or someone near you's life. Again, if you've got used children's books, Books or Wings are going to be there for you to donate. Look at it as you're clearing out the basement, and at the same time, a bunch of great kiddos are going to get books that they might not have otherwise seen. So sharing is key.